Thank you for joining us at Miniature Wargaming Labs, and today we will be painting Green Goblin for the Mural Crisis Protocol. And so he's on one of the larger bases. He's only got a few colors here, but let's go over what paints we used. And here we haven't used any technical paints, contrast paints, though this is a good model to use for contrast. I think it would respond well to it. But that's not widely available everywhere, and they don't have starter kits. So what are some paints you can find in some of the starter kits at your friendly local game store? So the purple and the green are actually just beaten purple, so like a royal purple from P3, and I used a moot green from Games Workshop. To change the variation of colors, you just take a drop of Pallid Witch Flesh and mix it up in your palette, and you've got the colors you need to highlight it. Now, in between those highlights, I put a little wash of Null Oil to seep into the cracks to give a little bit more character and three-dimensional pop to his outfit. So for the little means of transportation, that was all layers of Runefang steel with some Null Oil thrown on in between applications, just to add some pop to it. And the eyes are Mephiston red on the board. The pumpkins are Troll Slayer orange, washed with Null Oil, and then P3 Ember orange. Now the little flames coming out the back, that's Ember orange, Mural Yellow, with just a touch of Pallid Witch Flesh white. So you can see we get a lot of reuse of some of the paints there. And Mural Yellow is used for his eyes, and the Pallid Witch Flesh for his teeth. Now the flame here, that started off as white, Mural Yellow at the exhaust nozzle, and then just a glaze of Abaddon black through here, and you'll see how we did this effect here. Not perfect, but quick and easy to do. Alright. Now, the way I primed this model is I used Standard Mechanicus Gray from Games Workshop, but you can go to your friendly local game store and find cheaper alternatives such as Army Painter's Uniform Gray, or if you want, Krylon Gray Primer is actually a decent option. I prefer it on my metal ones, but you can use it as long as you don't get over enthusiastic with how much you spray on this guy, because it will flood out the detail. So let's go ahead and get started on this guy. To start, we have our model freshly primed but dried in Sector Mechanicus Gray. So the first step we're going to make is we're going to do his clothing. So that's going to be the purple parts. So I'm going to use P3's Brazen Purple, and we're just probably going to put on one thick coat. So make sure to shake up the paint. I don't need to use a nice brush for this. Use one I've beaten up, but one that I can control. And we'll just start putting on the purple here. Don't worry about keeping it tidy at this stage. I have plenty of opportunities to clean it up as we go along. For the next step, we're going to paint the little craft he's riding on. So for that, I'm going to use some silver, Runefang silver here, and put one coat down. So since we're still roughing it in, I'm not going to use one of my nice brushes. Just something I'll get on the paint quickly. The only part we got to watch out for is we want to make a nice smooth cut around his purple shoes, so we don't have to touch that up. the next step, I am going to take some Mephiston Red and I'm going to paint the little inset eyes in his little flying craft. So I'm going to get my fine tip brush, going to shake this paint and then get it open. I only need a little bit of it. There we go. Now we're going to move to paint the contrail coming out of his little vehicle there. For that, I'm going to use some Pallid Witch Flesh. The only part you have to be careful about is cutting in around the silver. Do that gently. And the rest, just one big area cover. One thick coat should do it. Now we're going to paint the other parts of his uniform in green, and for this I'm going to use a brighter green, moot green, and we'll start applying that. So this I want to be careful and not stain the lines and not touch the purple. For the next step, we're going to need some Abaddon Black, and we're going to do his little strap here to his little case. First thing we'll do is we'll just outline it. Just run along the top edge of the strap all the way around. Now when you're painting this figure, notice that there's a little buckle right here. So instead of doing all the silver at once, I wanted to paint this belt black, and then I'll do the touches on the buckle. And I'm going to turn back to my Runefang steel, and I just need a little bit of paint. Now we're going to paint the pumpkins and the little flames coming off them. I am going to use Troll Slayer Orange as the first layer. Now we'll get these pumpkins painted up. Alright, now that I have all the colors for the first layer down, what I'm going to do is take some Nuln Oil and give that a shake. And I moistened, here, it's a dry brush, I've messed up a lot. I've moistened the bristles there. Going to put some Nuln Oil on there, and I'm just going to put a thin coat all over Green Goblin. And this way it'll seep into all the cracks and grooves. Now the part I'm not going to touch is the exhaust plume. I have a different plan for that. Make sure you get the underside. There's actually a lot of detail under here I didn't realize. There's other exhaust ports. Now that the Null oil has dried, I'm going to start highlighting the various parts of the model. For that, I'm going to start with his little outfit, the purple part. I'm going to take the beaten purple. So the Null oil added a depth and shade by gathering all the dark material inside all the grooves. Now I'm going to take the highlighted areas, I'm going to make them a little bit brighter. So I'm going to take a little bit of purple that I used. I'm going to take just a touch of Pallid Witch Flesh. It's a white color. I'm going to mix them together. Now what you do, let's blend the color to what you want. Just keep on adding drops of one under the other. For example, that might be a little too white. So I'll add some more purple to bring it back up. This is easier with the Armory Painter dropper bottles, but I like this purple. And I think that's where I want it. Now that I've got my blend, what I'm going to do is just take the side of the brush and the raised edges and just run the brush along it. And the more layers of paint that you add, and the thicker those layers are, the more it'll change the underlying color. Let's see, now his boot's starting to pop out. Alright, so I've got my layer of purple on there, and that makes his little outfit pop out. So now I'm going to focus on the green. See his ears and his face, and what the purple's not coloring. To do that, I'm going to go back to Moot Green, and I'm going to do the same thing I did with the purple. I'm going to mix some Pallid Witch Flesh in there. So this time I'm going to start out with the white. Just going to get a touch of white in there. I'm going to take my moot green, and let's see what this looks like. That good? Yeah, I think I'm happy with that. I'm going to do the same thing did with the purple. I'm just going to highlight the raised surfaces. See, that contrast there makes his face really pop out. And we'll do the same thing with his knees and his musculature. The way you want to think about it is light's coming down from the top. So, like I did with his purple uniform, I put more layers of purple where I imagine the light coming down. I'm going to do the same thing with his green, so I'm barely going to touch the underside of his thighs, but the top side will get a little more attention from the green. Alright, starting to see some of that muscle definition come out, and we'll finish going around the model. Now that we did the purple and the green, next thing I'm going to do is yellow for his eyes, and those things are tiny. So I've got a little tiny brush, and I'm going to use some Mural Yellow, and I've already mixed some up and thinned it down in here. And so I just want one thin little touch. Something I like to do with eyes, turn the model upside down. Alright, got a little yellow there. Now, since I mixed up some yellow, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to thin down the yellow I made in there a little bit more. So I'm going to take my tool And I'm gonna thin it down some. And so what I do is mix the water in, then I pull the paint up the side and I see how it runs down. See if it's got the right viscosity I'm looking for. And that looks about right. And then I'm just going to take a chunk brush here, I'm going to wet down the bristles and right around the exhaust. And what this will do is it's not a wash, so it won't get runny, but it's got enough viscosity that it won't cling to the surface. More of the yellow will go down. Alright, that's our start there. Alright, now that I've got right by the exhaust nozzle, some of the yellow paint in there, I want to work into here. And I want to darken that up. So I'm going to take some Abaddon Black. And I'm going to take my tool there, going to get a drop of black, dip it in some water, and we're going to mix this up. We're going to thin it down, but not as much as we would a wash. This is kind of like making your own homemade glaze. And so I pull the paint up, and it's running right back down in. That means it's as thin as I'd like it. So taking my brush, I think right about there will do it, and we've got to wait for that to dry. Next, I'm going to highlight the black of his little satchel here, and for that I'm going to use a GW paint, the Fang. It's just a really dark gray blue. I'm going to take my brush, I put a bit of it in the belly of the brush, and so I'm just going to use the flat edge of the brush here to just highlight the edges. And then I'll just take the tip and just do some flicks across the back to make it look like light's reflecting off folds that you can't see. I'm going to go all the way around an edge of the strap here. And that makes the black of the strap pop out from the purple. The next thing we're going to highlight is his little mode of transportation. And we're going to turn to Runefang Steel, and I'm going to put a couple layers on here. Basically until you get it to the level of shine that you're happy with. If you want the more graphic comic kind, then it should be a lot of silver. If you're going for a grim and dark one, then just a couple highlights there will do. And what I'm doing is I'm just touching areas where light would reflect, and I'm just smacking the brush around. It's horribly destructive on the brush. I'll get a new one. I'm going to put more silver where the light would be shining down, so on the top parts of the platform. And just go around, keep layering the silver on. Now as we get close to being done, I'm going to address the exhaust plume coming out of the back here. So I notice there's some hard transitions from this yellow to white to gray. So use some washes, and we want to start tying this in together to make it look smoother. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some Pallid Witch Flesh, and I'm going to take a small dry brush and get a little bit of paint on there, and then I'm going to get a lot of the paint off my brush, and then what I'm going to do is start dry brushing this. And I'm only going to dry brush halfway up the yellow. And I'm only going to dry brush partway down the black. And what this will do is this will start blending the extreme edges of our three colors together. And I'll just keep on going with that until I've blended it in a way that we're happy with. The hardest part is these blacks, where the black touches the white. You gotta get that smoother. Next we're going to work on the pumpkins. So I started off originally with a base of Troll Slayer orange, and then we put some Nuln Oil on it. Now we're going to take some Ember Orange from P3. And we're going to start prettying up the pumpkin there. on a nice fine tip brush here. That one might be a little too thick. Let's go with this one. Now we're just going to do between the lines here. Nice little thin coat. And what we're going to do is just apply layers of this orange until we're happy with how our pumpkin looks. And we're going to run some of this up into the plume here. Alright, now I've got the pumpkins where I want them. I'm going to take some Mural Yellow, and so the idea is these pumpkins are emitting a crackling flame, kind of like a fuse. And so at the base of the flame exiting from the pumpkin, I'm going to take some of that Mural Yellow, and I thinned it down already, thinned it down quite a bit, and I'm just going to put some little glazing right here. That'll be the start of the flame issuing forth from the pumpkin. Don't need much. And the idea is we tie it into the orange by putting thinner coats. So I'll put like 2 or 3 coats of the yellow close to the pumpkin, and farther away I'll only put about 1 coat of the Mural Yellow, and it'll be thin. And don't worry about being precise on this. Remember, it is a flame. They are nonlinear systems. Alright, so I got all my layers down here. Now we gotta let that dry. Now our yellow is drying, and while it's doing that, I'm gonna go, I took some pallid witch flesh and I thinned it down quite a bit. And what I'm gonna do is just when you use fireworks, sometimes you get like a bright white. Just going to put several thin coats to make this this is where the ignition is coming out. And so it's just a little streaks of the white. See right there how it, so we have the orange underneath, we've got progressively more shades of yellow as we approach the pumpkin, and then we just put a couple touches of white there. Make them like little streaks. That gives that glow to it. So I'm going to make the center of the white the most layers of white to give it the sense that there's variation. That looks pretty good. Not bad for 2 minutes 20 seconds. And the last thing I'll do is, since I've got the white out, I'm just going to touch his teeth. Run the brush across his teeth. And that should give his face a little more depth. Alright, I'm just putting thin coats of white over the green. Don't do this. It's just translucent enough to make the green pop a little bit more on his face. That way I can get more character out of it. From, basically it'll be 4 feet away from this thing. So, that is the Green Goblin. Ah, man. I'll have to clean that up. That spread there. Okay, that happens sometimes. Fortunately, it's not in a bad place. That's why I try to use the paint handle. With this larger base, I don't have the big paint handle yet. Just blend that back in. That happens. Okay, so there's Green Goblin. Ready for miniature gaming. Alright, thank you for joining us at Miniature Wargaming Lab, and we'll see you next time.